There are engines that make history. Then there are engines that refuse to become history. Walk through any truck stop in America. Find a veteran driver who hauled freight in the 1980s or 1990s. Mention just two numbers. 3, 4, 0, 6. Watch their face change. Some will smile. Some will laugh. Others will tell you stories that sound impossible. 1,000,000 miles. 2,000,000 miles. Engines that outlived 3 truck cabs. Trucks abandoned in fields that fired up after years of sitting. Owners turning down brand new trucks just to keep driving one old Caterpillar. It almost sounds like mythology. But here's the strange part. Even today, decades after production ended, truckers are still paying astonishing prices for used Cat 3406 engines. Some spend over $30,000 rebuilding one instead of buying a newer engine. Why? Why would someone choose a 40-year-old diesel over today's computerized power plants? Was the Cat 3406 really that good? Or did it simply arrive at the perfect moment in trucking history? To answer that question, we have to travel back to an era when horsepower was king, electronics barely existed, and America demanded an engine that simply refused to quit. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, trucking was changing fast. Loads were getting heavier. Routes were getting longer. Drivers wanted more speed climbing mountain grades without constantly grabbing another gear. Fleet owners wanted lower operating costs. And mechanics wanted one thing above all else: an engine they could actually fix. The interstate highway system had matured. Cross-country freight operations became standard rather than exceptional. Trucking companies were no longer running regional routes with occasional long hauls. They were building nationwide networks. That meant engines needed to survive conditions their predecessors never faced. Continuous operation. Back-to-back coast-to-coast runs. Minimal downtime between loads. Drivers pushing hard to meet delivery schedules. Most heavy-duty diesels of the era delivered respectable power, but longevity often came at the expense of performance. You could have an engine that lasted. Or you could have an engine with power. Rarely both. Caterpillar believed they could deliver both. The company had already built a reputation through construction equipment, mining machinery, and industrial engines that survived some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Engines running in desert heat. Engines buried in coal mines. Engines powering massive earthmovers carrying hundreds of tons. Now they wanted to dominate the highway. The answer became the Cat 3406. At first glance, it didn't look revolutionary. It was an inline 6-cylinder diesel. Large. Heavy. Simple. But beneath that familiar layout lived engineering that bordered on overkill. The displacement measured 893 cubic inches, or 14.6 liters. That massive size allowed enormous torque without forcing the engine to work at high RPM. Most versions produced between 350 and 425 horsepower, although later models climbed beyond 500 horsepower depending on configuration. Torque numbers frequently exceeded 1,450 pound-feet. Those numbers were impressive during the 1980s. But numbers never tell the whole story. What mattered was how that power arrived. Drivers could pull hard from surprisingly low engine speeds. Instead of screaming toward redline, the 3406 simply dug in. Every combustion stroke felt deliberate. Steady. Relentless. It didn't sound stressed. It sounded confident. That confidence came from an incredibly robust foundation. The block itself was massive. Cast iron construction. Thick cylinder walls that could handle extreme pressures and temperatures without distortion. The crankshaft was forged to survive punishment that would destroy lighter designs. Large main bearings spread engine loads over wider surfaces. Heavy connecting rods handled enormous cylinder pressures without complaint. The pistons were designed with generous cooling galleries. Even the cooling system reflected Caterpillar's philosophy. Instead of designing for average use, they designed for abuse. Long mountain climbs. Extreme summer heat. Grossly overloaded trailers. Continuous operation. Stop-and-go city traffic. High-altitude operation where thinner air challenged lesser engines. This wasn't an engine built around minimum acceptable strength. It was built with enormous safety margins. Components that could handle twice the advertised workload. Materials chosen for durability rather than cost savings. Manufacturing tolerances held tighter than industry standards required. And that's where the legend truly began. Truckers discovered something fascinating. The harder they worked the engine, the more it seemed to enjoy it. Stories spread across truck stops. Drivers hauling logging trailers through the Pacific Northwest. Heavy equipment across the Rockies. Steel through Appalachia. Oversized loads crossing the desert's southwest. Many expected catastrophic failures. Conventional wisdom said you couldn't push an engine that hard for that long. Something would break. Something would wear out. Something would fail. Instead, the engines just kept running. One driver reported hauling triple-digit loads through mountain passes for 15 years on the original engine. Another claimed over 2 million miles before the first major overhaul. Fleet managers started noticing patterns. Trucks equipped with 3,406 engines consistently logged higher miles between major services. Downtime decreased. Maintenance costs stabilized. Driver satisfaction improved because they trusted their equipment. Word spread beyond professional trucking. Oil field operators. Construction companies. Logging operations. Anyone needing reliable power under punishing conditions started requesting Caterpillar. Of course, no engine is indestructible. The Cat 3406 had weaknesses. Some early versions developed cooling issues if neglected. Improper maintenance could damage cylinder liners. Turbochargers eventually wore out. Injectors required attention after years of service. Head gaskets could fail if overheated repeatedly. Oil leaks developed around aging seals. But here's the difference. Most failures weren't terminal. They were fixable. Mechanics could rebuild almost everything. Cylinder heads came off. Liners came out. Crankshafts could be machined. Bearings replaced. Pistons upgraded. Valves refurbished. Turbochargers swapped. Instead of throwing the engine away, you gave it another life. Sometimes multiple lives. That rebuild-friendly philosophy became one of Caterpillar's greatest advantages. Today, many modern engines are packed with integrated electronics and emissions hardware that make repairs increasingly expensive. Proprietary diagnostic tools. Manufacturer-specific software. Components married electronically to the ECU. Repairs that require dealer authorization. The 3406 belonged to another era. A skilled mechanic with the proper tools could diagnose problems using experience instead of laptops. Listen to the engine. Watch the smoke. Feel the vibration. Check compression. Measure fuel pressure. Inspect components. The diagnostic process relied on mechanical understanding rather than electronic interpretation. Many repairs happen right inside a truck shop rather than requiring specialized factory equipment. Downtime stayed lower. Repair bills stayed manageable. And trucks returned to work. That mattered enormously. Because every hour a truck sits still, it loses money. Independent mechanics could compete with dealerships. Small-town shops could service the same engines as metropolitan facilities. Parts availability remained excellent because Caterpillar supported their engines long after sale. Drivers stranded in remote areas could often find someone capable of fixing a 3406. That reliability created peace of mind. Nobody wanted to break down. But if it happened, help was available. Then came one of the biggest milestones in the engine's evolution. The arrival of the Cat 3406B. Refinements improved fuel delivery. Reliability increased. Power climbed. Owners noticed smoother performance and better efficiency without sacrificing durability. The basic architecture remained. The fundamental strength stayed intact. But Caterpillar addressed minor weaknesses discovered through millions of real-world miles. Cooling improvements. Better oil filtration. Refined combustion chamber design. Upgraded injection timing. Each generation learned from the previous. Then came the 3406C. More improvements. Better cooling. Updated components. Even stronger reliability. By this point, Caterpillar wasn't simply selling engines. They were building trust. Drivers who had once been skeptical became loyal for life. Fleet managers noticed something impossible to ignore. Higher purchase prices often translated into lower lifetime operating costs. Why? Because replacing one engine every million miles is far cheaper than replacing 2, or 3, or 4. The math became undeniable. Durability delivered genuine economic value. Initial costs mattered less than total cost of ownership. And on that measure, the 3406 dominated. Then came perhaps the most famous version of them all. The CAT 3406E. Everything changed. Electronics finally entered the picture. At first, many traditional truckers resisted. Computers? Sensors? Electronic injectors? That wasn't how trucking had always worked. Old-school drivers preferred mechanical simplicity. They understood governors. They understood mechanical injection pumps. They didn't necessarily trust electronics. What happened when sensors failed? What happened when computers malfunctioned? Would they be stranded? Would repairs become impossible? But Caterpillar managed something remarkable. The 3406E preserved much of the original engine's rugged character while dramatically improving fuel control and performance. The block remained strong. The bottom end stayed bulletproof. The mechanical foundation continued. But now, electronic control offered precision impossible with mechanical systems. Horsepower became easier to tune. Throttle response sharpened. Fuel delivery optimized across the entire RPM range. Emissions improved without destroying drivability. Diagnostics became more sophisticated. The engine could communicate problems before catastrophic failure. Drivers received warnings. Mechanics got fault codes. Problems became easier to identify. For many drivers, the 3406E represented the perfect bridge between old-school durability and modern technology. It delivered the reliability they trusted, with performance they appreciated, and technology that actually helped rather than hindered. Skeptics became converts. The 3406E earned its own legendary status. Some argue it represented the pinnacle, the best version Caterpillar ever built. The final evolution before everything changed. Then came the storm nobody could stop. Emissions regulations. Beginning in the late 1990s and accelerating through the 2000s, diesel engines faced increasingly strict environmental standards. The EPA introduced tier after tier of requirements. Each round demanded lower emissions, lower particulate matter, lower nitrogen oxides, lower everything. Manufacturers introduced exhaust gas recirculation, variable geometry turbochargers, diesel particulate filters, selective catalytic reduction, diesel exhaust fluid injection. Each innovation reduced emissions. Each innovation also increased complexity. More sensors, more wiring, more software, more potential failure points, more expensive repairs, more downtime. Caterpillar fought hard to adapt. They invested heavily in emissions technology. They developed sophisticated after-treatment systems. They pushed engineering boundaries. But the company eventually made one of the biggest decisions in trucking history. Rather than continue investing billions into increasingly strict on-highway emissions compliance, they walked away. In 2008, Caterpillar exited the North American highway engine market. They would continue building industrial engines, construction equipment, mining machinery, marine propulsion, power generation. But highway trucks, no more. Just like that, the CAT highway diesel era ended. And something unexpected happened. Demand exploded. Truckers suddenly realized there would never be another engine quite like the 3406. No more new CAT engines. No more factory support for highway applications. No more evolution. The final chapter had closed. Used trucks equipped with pre-emissions Caterpillar engines became incredibly desirable. Prices climbed. Clean examples disappeared quickly. Owners who planned to sell often changed their minds. Because replacing the truck meant replacing the engine they trusted. And nothing compared. Even today, buyers search specifically for trucks powered by the 3406. Some purchase worn-out engines solely to rebuild them. Others swap modern engines out entirely, spending thousands just to install an older Caterpillar. That sounds irrational. Until you understand the economics. Imagine spending $35,000 rebuilding an engine. At first, that sounds outrageous. Why not buy something new? Modern engines offer warranties, factory support, latest technology. But if the rebuilt engine reliably works another million miles, the math begins to change. Especially for owner-operators who depend on consistent uptime. New engines might offer better fuel economy under perfect conditions. But real-world operation involves variables. Heavy loads, mountain terrain, extreme weather, aggressive schedules. Under those conditions, proven reliability often outweighs theoretical efficiency. Reliability isn't just comforting. It's profitable. A truck earning money beats a truck in the shop. Every single time. Fuel economy also played a surprising role. Modern engines can certainly achieve impressive efficiency under ideal conditions. Laboratory testing. Flat highways. Moderate loads. Optimal temperatures. But many experienced drivers claim properly tuned 3406 engines delivered outstanding real-world fuel economy while pulling extremely heavy loads. The engine didn't constantly hunt for gears. It maintained torque. It stayed within its power band. Drivers worked less. The truck worked harder. And long-haul fatigue quietly decreased. Fewer gear changes meant less driver effort. Smoother power delivery reduced stress. Confidence in the equipment improved focus. These factors didn't appear on specification sheets. But they mattered. Experienced drivers understood. Fleet managers noticed. Accountants appreciated the results. Then there was the sound. Ask enthusiasts about the Cat 3406, and many won't begin by talking about horsepower. They'll talk about the exhaust note. Deep. Mechanical. Purposeful. Every acceleration carried a signature rumble that modern emissions systems have largely muted. You could identify a Cat-powered truck from blocks away. That distinctive sound became part of trucking culture. For many truckers, that sound represented freedom. Long highways. Open skies. Independent trucking before computers controlled nearly every aspect of engine operation. It wasn't merely nostalgia. It was identity. The sound reminded drivers why they chose this life. The independence. The open road. The satisfaction of moving America's freight. Of course, no legend survives without criticism. The Cat 3406 wasn't perfect. It was heavy. Several hundred pounds heavier than some competitors. That weight reduced payload capacity slightly. Fuel consumption could rise dramatically if driven aggressively. Stomping the throttle burned fuel quickly. The engine rewarded smooth driving and punished abuse. Parts weren't always cheap. Caterpillar components commanded premium prices. Genuine parts cost more than aftermarket alternatives. Rebuilds required investment. Improper tuning sometimes shortened engine life. Overfueling damaged injectors. Excessive boost destroyed turbochargers. Poor maintenance ruined liners. The engine demanded respect. And electronic versions eventually developed their own sensor-related issues. Position sensors failed. Wiring harnesses corroded. ECU problems appeared. Software glitches occurred. Yet remarkably, none of those criticisms erased its reputation. Because owners consistently measured value differently. Not by monthly payments. Not by showroom technology. But by whether the engine started every morning. Whether it pulled every hill. Whether it brought them home. Night after night. Year after year. mile after mile. That reliability created stories impossible to manufacture through advertising. Stories passed from one generation of drivers to the next. Fathers teaching sons. Veteran mechanics training apprentices. Old owner-operators sharing hard-earned lessons over coffee at truck stops before sunrise. The knowledge transferred. The respect continued. The CAT 3406 became more than an engine. It became a benchmark. Every new diesel that followed would inevitably face the same question. Is it as reliable as a 3406? Very few earn that comparison. Even today, rebuilding companies continue restoring these engines with upgraded components, improved machining techniques, and tighter manufacturing tolerances than were available decades ago. Modern metallurgy, better bearings, improved sealing technology, enhanced cooling systems. Some rebuilt engines may actually leave the shop stronger than they originally arrived from the factory. That's a remarkable thought. An engine designed generations ago. Still evolving. Still working. Still earning money. Still inspiring loyalty. Specialty shops dedicate entire facilities to 3406 rebuilding. They've perfected the process. They know every weakness. They've engineered solutions. They've built reputations around resurrecting these engines. And business remains strong. Perhaps that's the real reason truckers continue paying a fortune for the CAT 3406. They're not buying old iron. They're buying confidence. Confidence that when the key turns, the engine will answer. Confidence that when the mountain appears, the truck won't flinch. Confidence that another 1,000 miles are simply another day at work. Confidence built over millions of miles. Proven through decades of service. Validated by countless drivers who trusted their livelihood to this engine. In an industry where downtime can destroy profits overnight, that confidence becomes priceless. The CAT 3406 didn't refuse to die because it was magical. It refused to die because Caterpillar built it with extraordinary strength, practical serviceability, and engineering margins that modern cost pressures rarely allow. They over-engineered when others optimized. They chose durability when others chose weight savings. They supported longevity when others planned obsolescence. Its legacy wasn't created by advertisements. It was written 1 mile at a time. One heavy load at a time. One loyal driver at a time. One successful delivery at a time. One mountain conquered at a time. And maybe that's why, decades later, people still search for one. Not because it's old, but because some machines become timeless. The CAT 3406 earned that distinction the hardest way possible. By proving itself, over and over again, on millions upon millions of unforgiving highway miles. Through blistering deserts and frozen tundra. Through mountain passes and coastal highways. Through decades of changing technology and shifting regulations. It simply worked. And sometimes, that's all that matters. If you enjoyed this story and want more deep dives into the legendary engines, trucks, and machines that shaped the trucking industry, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments which diesel legend deserves the spotlight next. Because sometimes, the greatest stories aren't about the newest technology, they're about the machines that simply refuse to quit.